Commander Tom Mali of the Zephyrian Corsairs had intercepted exactly 47 merchant vessels in his illustrious career of space piracy, and he prided himself on reading species correctly. Humans, according to every database, every military briefing, and every cantina story across the galaxy, were soft, peaceful, the kind of beings who negotiated first and shot never. So when his ship's targeting systems locked onto the small human cargo vessel drifting through the outer rim, Mali expected the usual routine. Panic distress calls, desperate pleas for mercy, maybe some crying. What he got instead was Captain Brandon Torres crackling over the comm with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Well, Torres drawled, his voice carrying that peculiar human accent that made everything sound like a joke waiting for a punchline. Looks like we've got company, boys. Hey there, Zephyrian vessel. Nice paint job. Did you do that yourself, or did you hire professionals? Mali's second-in-command, Quartermaster A, turned his four-eyed head toward his captain with visible confusion. Sir, he is complimenting our hull modifications? Apparently Mali muttered, then activated his comm. Human vessel, prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and nobody needs to get hurt. There was a pause, then actual laughter. Not hysterical, terrified laughter, but the kind of chuckling you might hear at a particularly amusing dinner party. Oh, this is rich, Torres continued. You know what, Commander Mali, is it? Sure, come on over. We were getting bored anyway. Fair warning, though, you might want to bring some coffee. We just ran out. And frankly, that's the real tragedy here. Mali stared at his communication panel as if it had personally offended his ancestors. In 47 successful piracy operations, nobody had ever offered him beverages. Quartermaster A, are our weapons systems functioning correctly? All systems operational, sir. The humans should be terrified. Should be, yes, Mali agreed, watching the human ship's airlock cycle open in what appeared to be eager anticipation. And yet here we are. Boarding the human vessel felt less like a hostile takeover and more like an awkward family reunion nobody had planned for. The corridors were clean, well-lit, and decorated with what appeared to be photographs of various crew members making faces at the camera. Mali's boarding party moved through the ship with weapons drawn, expecting ambush tactics or hidden defenses. Instead, they found Brandon Torres leaning against a bulkhead, arms crossed, wearing a grin that suggested he was witnessing the galaxy's most entertaining comedy show. Welcome aboard the Lucky Strike, he announced cheerfully. I'm Torres. This is my crew. That's Amy Kowalski, our engineer, and over there's Jenkins, our pilot. Jenkins, wave at the nice pirates. Jenkins, a lanky human with grease-stained coveralls, actually waved. Mali felt his left eye developing a twitch. Where is your cargo hold? Oh, straight ahead, Torres said, gesturing down the main corridor. Though I should mention, we're not carrying much in the way of traditional valuables, mostly just personal effects, some equipment, and he paused, seeming to consider something. Well, you'll see. The cargo hold was larger than Mali had expected, filled with standard shipping containers and maintenance equipment. Nothing extraordinary, nothing worth risking interstellar piracy charges over. He was beginning to suspect the humans were running some kind of elaborate bluff when Quartermaster A's voice went up an octave. Commander Mali, sir, you need to see this. In the far corner of the hold, taking up roughly a quarter of the available space, sat a containment unit that belonged in a maximum security facility, not a civilian cargo ship. The warnings alone covered half the surface: extreme danger, apex predator, authorized personnel only, do not feed, lethal venom, and in several languages, seriously, do not open this thing. The containment field hummed with enough power to run a small city, and through the translucent barriers, Mali could make out something large, dark, and moving with the fluid grace of a natural-born killer. What, Mali asked slowly, is that? Oh, that's just Fluffy, Amy Kowalski said, joining the conversation with the casual tone one might use to discuss the weather. He's been sleeping most of the trip. Good thing, too, he gets cranky when his schedule gets disrupted. Mali's species had evolved from prey animals, and every instinct he possessed was currently screaming at him to run. The containment readings showed a creature weighing nearly 800 kilograms, with bioelectric signatures that suggested enough raw physical power to tear through ship hulls. "You named an apex predator, Fluffy?" "Well, we didn't want to hurt his feelings," Torres explained reasonably. "Besides, razor-clawed death machine seemed a bit on the nose, don't you think?" The thing in the containment unit shifted, and Molly caught a glimpse of teeth. "So many teeth! How many of you has it eaten?" The humans exchanged glances and burst into laughter. "Eaten us?" Amy wiped tears from her eyes. "Commander, Fluffy's a sweetheart. He wouldn't hurt a fly." "Well, he might hurt a fly. Flies are pretty small, and he's got to eat something." Molly's tactical training kicked in, overlaying the situation with military precision that had served him well in 4 decades of space combat. Humans were transporting an apex predator. Humans were known for their peculiar approach to warfare. Therefore, the apex predator was obviously a weapon. Biological warfare, he muttered to Quartermaster A, who nodded sagely. "They're running a military transport disguised as civilian shipping. The creature is their secret weapon." It made perfect sense. Humans had a reputation for showing mercy to defeated enemies, for negotiating instead of annihilating, for being generally reasonable and diplomatic. But what if that was all misdirection? What if humans only appeared peaceful because they were carrying something so terrifying that they didn't need to threaten anyone directly? "Sir," Quartermaster whispered, "should we retreat? Report this to Admiral Vashi?" Molly considered this. The smart play would be to back away slowly, let the humans continue on their way and pretend this encounter never happened. Unfortunately, Molly had not survived this long in the piracy business by being smart. He had survived by being stubborn, suspicious, and just paranoid enough to stay ahead of Galactic Patrol. "No," he decided. "We proceed as planned, but carefully." Meanwhile, the humans were doing something that completely undermined his theory about military operations. Torres had produced an actual coffee pot from somewhere and was setting up what appeared to be a beverage station on one of the cargo containers. Amy Kowalski was rummaging through a supply crate, humming what sounded like a popular song from the Inner Systems. "Anyone take cream in their coffee?" Torres called out. "We've got synthetic, but it's the good stuff. Cost extra." Molly stared at the humans, then at the containment unit holding their alleged biological weapon, then back at the humans who were treating a piracy situation like an impromptu social gathering. His eye twitched again. The universe, Molly reflected later, had a twisted sense of humor. Just as Torres was explaining the difference between synthetic creamer and the real thing, the ship's power grid decided to have what humans apparently called a moment. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the cargo hold in pulsing red illumination that made everything look like a scene from a horror vid. The containment unit's steady hum faltered, wavered, then died completely. "Oh," Amy Kowalski said, glancing up from her coffee preparation. "That's not good." Molly's survival instincts, honed by years of avoiding both Galactic Patrol and natural selection, screamed at him to run. The containment field was failing. Whatever nightmare fuel the humans had been transporting was about to break free. His crew was about to become a very messy footnote in some xenobiologist's research paper. "Evacuate," he barked to his boarding party. "Everyone back to the ship, now." But before anyone could move, the containment unit's transparent barriers flickered and died. The silence that followed lasted exactly 2 heartbeats, just long enough for Molly to register that he was about to die in the stupidest possible way. Then Fluffy emerged. The creature that unfolded itself from the containment unit defied several laws of physics and at least 3 regulations regarding proper nightmare construction. It stood nearly 3 meters tall on 6 legs that ended in claws capable of opening starship hulls like tin cans. Its head, if the writhing mass of sensory organs and teeth could be called a head, swiveled toward the assembled beings with predatory focus that made Molly's ancestors want to dig burrows and hide for several geological ages. Fluffy's hide was a shifting pattern of colors that hurt to look at directly, covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating that could probably deflect small arms fire. When it opened what might generously be called a mouth, Molly counted no fewer than 4 rows of fangs, each one roughly the size of his forearm and definitely sharp enough to remove limbs with casual efficiency. The creature's tail, a segmented appendage ending in a stinger the size of a sword, dripped something that hissed when it hit the deck plating. The smell alone suggested enough venom to depopulate a small colony world. Quartermaster made a sound that combined whimpering with praying in 3 different languages. 2 of Molly's boarding party had already fainted, which Molly considered a reasonable response to their current situation. The smart ones were slowly backing toward the exit, weapons raised in what they probably hoped was a threatening manner but looked more like a farewell gesture to their loved ones. Fluffy turned his massive head toward the assembled pirates, and Molly caught sight of eyes. So many eyes, each one the size of a dinner plate, glowing with an intelligence that suggested this creature didn't just kill for survival but possibly for entertainment value. "Well," Torres said conversationally, still holding his coffee pot, "looks like someone's awake." Molly opened his mouth to order a retreat, call for heavy weapons, or possibly just scream in several octaves simultaneously. Fluffy chose that moment to make his own contribution to the conversation. The sound that emerged from the creature's throat started as a rumble that vibrated through the deck plating and into Molly's bones. It built in volume and complexity, combining elements of a roar, a hiss, and something that might have been singing if you had a very liberal definition of music. "Easy there, big guy," Amy said, not even looking up from organizing coffee supplies. "We know you're hungry. Breakfast is coming." Fluffy's vocalization shifted into what sounded suspiciously like purring, if purring could be accomplished by something with the vocal capacity of a small earthquake. What happened next would haunt Molly's dreams for the rest of his considerably shortened lifespan. Instead of immediately devouring everyone present, which would have been the logical, expected, and frankly merciful outcome, Fluffy did something infinitely more disturbing. The massive apex predator, capable of single-handedly ending small wars, looked around the cargo hold with those terrifying dinner plate eyes until he spotted the humans. Then his tail started wagging. Not the elegant, measured movement of a proper predator's tail, but the enthusiastic, full-body wiggle of something experiencing pure, unfiltered joy. The stinger at the end of his tail, still dripping enough venom to kill a battlecruiser crew, swished back and forth with such enthusiasm that it was carving grooves in the deck plating. "There's my good boy," Torres cooed, setting down his coffee pot and opening his arms as if greeting a beloved family pet. "Did someone have a nice nap?" Fluffy made another sound, this one definitely in the purring category despite being loud enough to rattle the ship's hull. Then, with the fluid grace of something that had evolved to be death incarnate, he bounded across the cargo hold toward the humans. Molly's crew raised their weapons, preparing for the massacre that was surely about to unfold. Torres was going to be reduced to component atoms in approximately 3 seconds, followed by Amy, then the rest of them in whatever order Fluffy found most entertaining. Instead, the creature skidded to a halt in front of Torres and dropped his massive head down to human level, making soft, chittering noises that sounded disturbingly like a question. "Of course I missed you too," Torres said, reaching up to scratch behind what might have been Fluffy's ears if evolution had any sense of propriety. "Were you a good boy while we were gone? Did you dream about chasing space rabbits?" The purring intensified to the point where Molly could feel it in his chest cavity. Fluffy's eyes, all of them, closed in apparent bliss as Torres continued scratching behind his sensory clusters. "Oh, who's a fierce apex predator?" Amy joined in, pulling what appeared to be a grooming brush from her toolkit. "Who's got scary claws and enough venom to level a city block?" "You do, yes you do." Molly watched in growing horror as the humans engaged in what could only be described as baby talk with a creature that belonged in military containment facilities. Fluffy responded by rolling onto his back, exposing what appeared to be a slightly softer area of his armored belly, and making sounds that could only be described as giggling. "Belly rubs?" Torres asked in the same tone one might use to offer treats to a domestic animal. "Does someone want belly rubs?" Molly's worldview shattered with an audible crack. For 47 successful piracy operations, he had operated under the assumption that the universe made sense. Predators ate prey. Weapons were designed to kill. Apex predators were terrifying because they were dangerous, not because they wanted their tummies scratched. "Quartermaster A," he whispered, "please tell me this is a hallucination brought on by exposure to that creature's venom." "Sir, I do not believe we have been exposed to any venom," Quartermaster replied, though his voice suggested he rather wished they had been. "The humans appear to be playing with it." "Playing," Molly repeated numbly. Amy was now using her grooming brush on Fluffy's hide while Torres had moved on to scratching under his chin. The creature had all 6 legs in the air and was making sounds that definitely qualified as laughter, though the kind of laughter that could probably be heard from orbit. "Good boy, Fluffy," Torres said approvingly. "Such a good boy. Who's the best apex predator in the whole galaxy?" "That's right, you are." One of Molly's crew members, a veteran of 12 years of military service and 8 years of piracy, sat down heavily on a cargo container and stared at the ceiling with the expression of someone reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. "Sir," he said quietly, "I would like to request a transfer to anywhere else, preferably somewhere that makes sense." Molly felt obligated, as the senior officer present and the one whose decision-making had led them into this situation, to attempt some form of rational explanation for what he was witnessing. "Captain Torres," he began, his voice cracking only slightly, "that creature is classified as an apex predator by every xenobiological database in the galaxy." "Well, sure," Torres agreed, continuing to scratch behind Fluffy's sensory clusters. "He's from Morden 7, the death world in the outer spiral. Everything there is classified as an apex predator. The plants, the weather, the rocks probably. It's a very competitive ecosystem." Molly blinked. Morden 7 was quarantined by Galactic Council decree after 3 separate research expeditions simply vanished. The planet was considered so dangerous that approaching within 10 light years required special permits and a will filed in triplicate. "You went to Morden 7, Molly said slowly, "and brought back a pet." "Not just any pet," Amy chimed in, now brushing what appeared to be Fluffy's version of fur. "The best pet. Look at those eyes. Look at that face. Who could resist that face?" Molly looked at Fluffy's face, which currently featured 4 rows of fangs in what might have been a smile if you were extremely optimistic about facial expressions. Several of his crew members had begun making small whimpering sounds. "How?" Molly asked, because apparently he hated himself. "Does one domesticate an apex predator from a death world?" Torres brightened, clearly delighted by the question. "Oh, it wasn't that hard. See, we were doing some mineral surveys in the outer systems and our ship broke down near Morden 7. Had to land for repairs, and we found Fluffy as a baby. Well, babyish. He was only about 2 meters long at the time." 2 meters long, Molly repeated. "Tiny little thing all alone. Probably abandoned by his pack. We couldn't just leave him there. I mean, look at him." Molly looked at Fluffy, who was now making contented rumbling sounds while Amy scratched his belly. The creature's idea of contentment was producing enough seismic activity to register on ship sensors. "So we brought him aboard, fed him some of our rations, and it turns out he's incredibly social. Loves attention, loves playing, loves meeting new people." Torres paused. "Well, loves meeting new humans. Other species seem to make him nervous." "Nervous?" Molly echoed weakly. "Oh yes. When he gets nervous, he tends to defend his pack. That's us, by the way. We're his pack now." Torres said this with the casual pride of someone discussing a particularly successful garden. Molly looked around his crew, all of whom were armed, all of whom represented a potential threat to Torres and his people, and all of whom were currently being evaluated by a creature whose species had evolved specifically to remove threats from existence. "Perhaps," Molly said carefully, "we should discuss the terms of our departure." The situation might have ended there, with Molly's crew backing away slowly while making appropriately respectful noises about territorial boundaries and interspecies understanding. Unfortunately, not everyone in Molly's crew had developed his recent appreciation for tactical retreats and continued existence. Sergeant Moran, a veteran of the Centauri conflicts and someone whose tactical thinking had apparently never evolved past shoot first, ask questions later, chose that moment to demonstrate why he had never been promoted beyond sergeant. "This is ridiculous," Moran snarled, raising his plasma rifle toward Torres. "We came here for cargo, not to watch humans play with oversized pets. Stand down or I'll—" He never finished the sentence. Fluffy moved with a speed that defied physics, biology, and Molly's ability to track movement with his eyes. One moment the creature was lying on his back having his belly scratched, and the next moment Sergeant Moran simply wasn't there anymore. Molly blinked, then blinked again, then looked around the cargo hold as if Moran might have been relocated to a more convenient position rather than processed into component molecules. "Where," Molly asked weakly, "did Sergeant Moran go?" Fluffy was sitting politely next to Torres again, tail wagging, looking remarkably pleased with himself. There was no sign of Moran except for a small scorch mark on the deck plating and what might have been a few molecules of atmospheric disturbance. "Oh, Fluffy, no," Amy said in the tone of someone addressing a puppy who had tracked mud through the house. "Bad boy. We do not eat the guests without permission." Fluffy's ears, or the sensory clusters that served as ears, drooped slightly. He made a small, chittering sound that clearly indicated remorse. "I know they were being rude," Torres continued the scolding, "but that doesn't mean we eat them. What have we talked about regarding proper social behavior?" The massive apex predator hung his head in shame and made apologetic purring sounds. "That's right," Amy said firmly. "We use our words first. Eating people is only for emergencies, or if they're actively trying to hurt the pack. This was just regular rudeness, which we handle with stern looks and disappointed voices." Fluffy looked genuinely contrite, which was somehow more terrifying than when he had been demonstrating his species' approach to threat elimination. "Sorry about that," Torres said to Molly, as if apologizing for a minor social awkwardness rather than the instantaneous disappearance of a crew member. "He's still learning proper etiquette around strangers. Usually he's very well behaved." Molly stared at the spot where Moran had been standing. The sergeant had been an unpleasant individual with poor impulse control and a tendency toward violence, but he had also been 300 pounds of muscle, bone, and attitude. Fluffy had made him vanish so quickly that Molly wasn't entirely sure it had actually happened. "Did your pet just—" Molly began, then stopped, because he wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. "Eat your sergeant?" "Yeah, probably." Torres scratched behind Fluffy's sensory clusters again. "Don't worry though, Moran won't suffer. Fluffy's digestive acids work really quickly." Very humane, really. That was the moment when Molly finally understood the true horror of humanity's position in the galaxy. It wasn't that humans were peaceful. It wasn't that they showed mercy out of kindness or moral superiority. It wasn't that they negotiated because they believed in diplomatic solutions. Humans showed mercy because they were apex predators themselves, and they were bored. The revelation hit Molly like a cargo hauler to the face. Every interaction he'd ever heard about between humans and other species suddenly made terrible sense. Humans didn't defeat their enemies in battle because they didn't need to. They kept creatures like Fluffy as pets because they recognized kindred spirits. They negotiated and compromised and showed restraint because they were so far up the food chain that everything else was basically background noise. "You're not peaceful," Molly whispered, staring at Torres with dawning horror. "You're not diplomatic because you believe in peace. You're diplomatic because nothing in the galaxy is actually threatening enough to bother with proper violence." Torres considered this, still scratching Fluffy's sensory clusters. "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of condescending. You keep apex predators as pets because you are apex predators," Molly continued, his voice rising as the full implications sank in. "The whole galaxy thinks you're harmless merchants and peaceful explorers, but you're actually really good with animals," Amy suggested helpfully. "Monsters," Molly finished. "You're all monsters pretending to be civilized, and we never noticed because you've been treating the rest of us like amusing children who might bite if provoked." "That's not entirely fair," Torres protested. "Some of you are quite dangerous. The Altarians have those lovely poison spines, and the Centauri pack hunting techniques are genuinely impressive. It's not our fault that most galactic species evolved from prey animals, and we evolved from persistence hunters who thought persistence hunting was for quitters." Mali looked around his remaining crew, all of whom were staring at the humans with expressions of dawning comprehension and existential terror. Quartermaster had begun making small keening sounds that indicated his worldview was undergoing rapid and probably permanent revision. "This is why you offered us coffee," Mali said numbly. "This is why you're so casual about piracy. We're not actually dangerous to you. We're entertainment." "I wouldn't say entertainment," Torres replied thoughtfully. "More like a pleasant diversion. You seem nice enough. A bit shouty maybe, but that's probably just cultural differences." Fluffy made agreeable purring sounds, apparently approving of this assessment of interspecies relations. Mali's retreat from the human cargo vessel was not his finest tactical maneuver, but it was definitely his most necessary. "Get back to the ship," he ordered, his voice only slightly higher than usual. "Everyone back to the ship right now. Leave everything. Just go." His crew needed no encouragement. The remaining pirates moved toward the airlock with the purposeful speed of beings who had suddenly remembered they had important appointments elsewhere in the galaxy. "Hey, wait up!" Torres called after them, jogging along behind the retreating pirates with Fluffy bounding alongside him like an oversized, venomous puppy. "You sure you don't want to stay for coffee? Amy makes amazing biscuits. Fluffy loves meeting new people." "We're fine," Mali called back, not slowing down. "Really very fine. Absolutely no need for hospitality." "Are you sure?" Amy joined the conversation, appearing at Torres's shoulder. "Fluffy's been cooped up in that containment unit for days. He could use some exercise. Want to play fetch with him?" Mali reached his ship's airlock and practically dove through it. "Quartermaster A. Emergency departure, now." "But they seem so friendly," Torres continued, now standing at the airlock threshold with Fluffy's massive head peering over his shoulder. "Fluffy thinks you're all very interesting. Don't you, boy?" "Yes, you do." The last thing Mali heard before the airlock sealed was Fluffy's enthusiastic purring and Torres asking if anyone wanted to pet him. Admiral Vashi of the Zephyrian fleet had read many incident reports in his distinguished career. Reports of equipment failures, navigational errors, unexpected solar flares, and the occasional piracy operation gone wrong. He had never, however, received an incident report that began with the words "request immediate psychological evaluation for entire crew" and went downhill from there. Commander Mali's official report, filed 3 days after what military records would eventually classify as the Fluffy incident, ran to 14 pages and included 17 separate requests for crew therapy, 6 recommendations for policy changes, and 1 formal petition to reclassify humans from peaceful merchants to do not engage under any circumstances seriously, just leave them alone. "Sir." The report continued. "I must emphasize that the humans were not hostile. They offered us beverages. They invited us to pet their apex predator. They expressed genuine confusion when we declined their hospitality and fled for our lives. This may be the most terrifying behavior I have ever encountered in 47 years of military service." Admiral Vashi read the report twice, then poured himself a very large drink, then read it again. Quartermaster A's supplemental report. Mali had written, confirms that the humans appear to have domesticated a creature capable of processing a fully armed sergeant in under 2 seconds. Then scolded it for poor manners. The creature appeared genuinely remorseful. "I do not have adequate psychological frameworks to process this information." The report concluded with a detailed recommendation that all Zephyrian vessels avoid human space entirely and that existing trade agreements be renegotiated via long-distance communication only, and that any future diplomatic contact be conducted through heavily armed intermediaries from at least 3-star systems away. Also, Mali had added in a handwritten postscript, suggest we send gift baskets instead of conducting further military operations. The humans seem to appreciate coffee, and frankly, I would prefer to stay on their good side. They have pets, sir. Pets that eat sergeants. Please advise. Admiral Vashi filed the report under classified, then immediately sent copies to every fleet commander in Zephyrian space with a cover note that simply read, "New standing orders. Avoid humans." This is not a suggestion. Word spread through the galaxy with the efficiency that only truly terrifying information achieves. Within a month, every cantina, spaceport, and military briefing room from the core worlds to the outer rim had heard some version of the story. Humans kept apex predators as pets. Humans scolded world-ending monsters for poor table manners. Humans offered coffee to pirates and seemed genuinely disappointed when their hospitality was declined. The Altarian Merchant Guild issued new trading protocols that specifically prohibited member vessels from boarding human ships under any circumstances. The Centauri Military Council updated their threat assessment databases to classify humanity as benevolent, but probably best avoided. The Galactic Pirates Union, in an unprecedented move, officially discouraged its members from targeting human vessels on the grounds that it's just not worth the therapy bills. Most significantly, the proposed invasion of Earth by the Krolon Empire was quietly shelved when intelligence reports confirmed that humans considered creatures like Fluffy to be suitable household companions. If that's what they keep as pets, the Krolon War Council concluded, we probably don't want to find out what they consider proper military assets. Instead, they sent fruit baskets. The humans sent thank you notes and invited the Kronos to visit any time. The invitations included pictures of Fluffy wearing a bow tie. The Krolon Empire decided that maybe galactic conquest was overrated anyway,